Hey, welcome to Expanded Knowledge. Tonight we have a special guest, Michael Schratt. Michael has been researching UFO crash retrievals for decades. And so, thanks to Michael, he agreed to come on tonight because I thought
Mhm.
it would be very good to get Michael's perspective. We've seen the recent whistleblower, Jake Barber, come out and, claiming to be a firsthand helicopter pilot retrieving crashed UFOs. And the one, of course, that has gotten a lot of attention with the video that was shown was the egg-shaped craft. And it rang a bell for me because when I watched one of Michael's presentations um, a year or two ago, I remembered seeing some egg-shaped craft, and I was like, So, it's going to be great to get Michael's perspective here today as someone who's been studying this for a long time. And Michael, that's actually my first question for you is like, I'm just curious, like, how does it feel to you? Because you've been studying this for decades. Mind you, like a topic even within ufology that was ridiculed for a long time,
Right.
crash retrievals, and now here we are, like somebody's going through the official channels, like ready to be interrogated by Congress that like they worked on a crash retrieval. How does that feel to you?
It's long overdue. It's long overdue, and it's good to see that these cases are starting to come to the foreground here. It's getting into the mainstream media, but again, we're racing the undertaker. A lot of these Leonard Stringfield legacy crash retrieval witnesses, they're all
Mm,
gone. So it's even more important that we track these people down now, more than ever.
for sure. Um, cool. Well, yeah, so what could you tell us, Michael, about your research into egg-shaped crafts? I feel like it's not as much of a thing that people think about in the field.
Well, we've got a number of different configurations through the decades. We've got the saucers, we've got the cigar shaped craft, we've got the boomerangs, we've got the chevrons, we've got the trapezoids. Now, all the rage is flying platforms. So, as we go through the decades, you can see the configurations of these things have changed. However, there are a number of crash retrieval cases within the Stringfield files that mimic the form, fit, and function of what just came out a couple days ago, this so-called egg-shaped configuration. And so we want to take a look at some of those cases this evening.
All right, I'm ready to get into it. One real question real quick. You said flying platforms. What is that
Yeah,
exactly?
flying platforms. Yeah. Yep.
Can you explain that? I don't.
It looks like a rectangle with a white light at each corner.
Oh, okay, okay. So
So it kind of goes hand in hand with the triangles, but this is kind of the new thing now is the flying platforms. That's being seen
flying
around as well.
platforms. Wow, man.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So take us away, Michael. Let's look at
All
this
right,
history of the egg shape.
let's see if we can do this here. I'm going to present, share screen. Okay, window, and I'm going to go here and go here. Okay, hopefully you can see that.
Oh yeah, let me do
Okay.
this.
Yep.
Hold on one second. All right.
And I'm going to maximize this. So I think we should be tracking here. Okay. All right. So now I'm not going to get into a big dissertation about Roswell. However, there's a few things in here that we want to discuss because I think it plays a role with what we're talking about right now. So I'm going to go through this Roswell road trip very quickly here.
All right.
And here you can see the big map. And we're not talking about one event here. We're talking about multiple events. So if you look on the upper left, you'll see a big blob, a big dot. That's the debris field. We want to be about 5 nautical miles north of that, which is the touchdown site. That is the beginning of our Roswell story here. So you've got the touchdown site. That's where Lincoln La Paz and Louis Rickett discovered two things, which aren't talked about very much. Two things. Number one, they discovered fused green glass. That's the first thing. And then they discovered a black seamless box that we don't even think today the military industrial complex has been able to open. Now, we don't know for sure, but according to Don Schmidt, that was how that went down. Now, if we go directly south of that, we've got the debris field. That's where 7-year-old Timothy D. Proctor and Mac Brazel discovered the three types of debris. Now, The trajectory of the crash was from the northwest to the southeast. So you can see my arrows that show you the flight path. 2.5 miles southeast of the debris field is the second body site, where 2 bodies were ejected from the escape pod. Now, if we continue going forward all the way to the crash site, which is about 40 miles due north of Roswell, we've got 5 bodies recovered. 1 was still alive. And we've got 2 bodies recovered at the crash site, and 1 was seen outside the crash. So that's the breakdown here. Let me go to the next slide. So when you go there, this is kind of the landscape you're going to see. I'm going to move on here. And here you see Timothy D. Proctor with Mac Brazel on the morning of July 3rd, 1947. And there's a point to all this that I'm getting to here.
Okay.
Now, three types of debris were various shapes and sizes of this, what we would call this cigarette pack aluminum material. Could not be cut, could not be burned, could not be bent with a 16-pound sledgehammer. Then we had the so-called memory metal, where you could crinkle this up in your hand, you could let go of it, it would spread out like liquid mercury and then settle down to the floor. That was debris number 2. Debris number 3 were various lengths of I-beams with pastel hieroglyphic type symbols written on one side only. We'll continue on here. Now, here's where we get into our story. Now, this is July 8th, 1947. The retrieval operation is under full swing here. And what we're dealing with here, now this is according to Don Schmidt. The Roswell escape pod was a 13-foot long egg-shaped craft with a low-rise dome on top and a hull breach on the side of it. You can see off to the left where they have the ambulance truck. That's the survivor. But bottom line is, the escape pod associated with the Roswell incident was no larger than a Volkswagen. This thing was about 13 feet across. It looked like an egg. Let me continue on.
So it's reported that there was an escape pod out of the saucer?
Out of whatever the main craft was that exploded over the Foster Ranch, an escape pod came out of that and headed southeastbound until it crashed 40 miles north of Roswell.
And I've personally never heard that with the Roswell case. That's very interesting.
Because that explains all this debris, because this thing had a midair explosion, but the amount of debris does not equate to the size of the craft and the hull breach on the side of it. So by default, whatever was the main craft, that exploded over the Foster Ranch. And then there was an escape pod, according to Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, that headed southeastbound. Now, Major Jesse Marcel, who we have here.
Can I ask you one more thing before we continue? Just wanted to get your take really quick. Why do you think it exploded? The disc?
Well, we think it might have been a lightning strike.
Okay.
Apparently, these things are not perfect. There's other indications that we're shooting these down. That tracks with other witnesses. There's a rogue group within the military-industrial complex that's targeting, tracking, and shooting these things down. We had witnesses at Roswell where this thing came down. Is they heard thunderclaps, but then they heard a boom between the thunderclaps that was unlike regular thunder. So something absolutely went down here. Whether it was shot down, it got.
It looks like you got muted somehow. I don't know if you clicked something, but you're muted. Your microphone is
Okay, should be good now.
All right, cool. So we don't exactly still know exactly what made it explode.
You know, I don't think we know. It's a combination of a lightning strike, a purposeful takedown. That could be possible too, because we do have directed energy weapons, scalar weapons that can piggyback on pre-existing radar systems. So that is going on. Now, I referenced that because in 1953, when we had the Kingman UFO, not crash retrieval, but soft landing, that was brought down when it went right through a high-powered experimental radar range. Now, that's according to Harry Drew, who's no longer with us. He's the principal investigator on the Kingman UFO soft landing. And that thing absolutely flew through a very high power radar range and then came down. So it's not unheard of. Something could have happened here at Roswell as well.
Okay.
Now, according to Tom Carey, we have a witness who looked inside the escape pod. So, of course, I started digging. So here's the 1947 Roswell Army Airfield yearbook.
And you cut off before. Was there anything important about Jesse Marcel related to the?
No, just that he thought that this was something not from around here.
Okay.
We'll continue on here. Sergeant William W. Bud Taylor, and you can see the arrow here that points to Bud Taylor. I'm going to blow this up a little bit, and you'll get a better idea what he looks like. Now, this gentleman looked inside. Now, what did he see? Okay, here's his actual testimony. The craft, Taylor said, seemed like it could have been from Earth, only from our future. Certain areas of the interior of the craft were entwined with a network of strange plastic-like fibers or filaments, like fiber optics. The interior was also outfitted with embedded flat screens or display panels. An ethereal violet or pink purple color was incorporated into some of the materials of the construction of the craft. Some of the craft structure, and this is interesting, was embossed with purple color or incorporated into some of the materials of the construction of the craft. Some of the craft structure was embossed with unusual hieroglyphic-like symbols that he described as being somewhat like Asian writing. There were bodies, small corpses were found that he described as being like little humans.
And this was in the pod.
This was in the pod. That's correct. This was in the pod. That is absolutely correct.
And when did he see it?
He saw it on the morning of the 7th.
Okay.
Right in that time frame.
Very interesting. I never heard of this guy either.
Okay. So here is our drawing that shows you what the interior looks like. Now, it's a little bit large here, but we did the best we could with what we had. So we've got all the fiber optics. We've got the flat screen monitors. There was a hull breach. And then there was these hieroglyphic type writings on the inside wall. So picture this, a little bit smaller with kind of a more curved section on the walls. And you've got what the interior looks like. Something like this was seen by Bud Taylor, July 1947.
And when did he talk about that and give his testimony?
This was, I think 25 years ago.
Do you know like what researcher or book?
Tom Carey could tell us.
Okay. So he gave it to a UFO researcher, his testimony about seeing the inside of a pod, egg shape.
I got this information directly from Tom Carey. So I wanted to see if I could do a little bit of digging and verify this. So here's El Paso Times, May 9th, 1985. Services for W.F. Bud Taylor, 87 of Roswell, will be at 10 a.m. Friday in the First Church. So this is the guy. I mean, this is the gentleman we're talking about. This is his actual obituary. Okay, now, one thing that's not talked about. For some strange and odd reason, 509th Bomb Group, Roswell Army Airfield, did not have a crane on the base. They had to hire an independent contractor from downtown Roswell to drive all the way up to the crash site. And they had a lanyard with a netting. They picked up the egg-shaped craft from the ground and then brought it over to the 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy truck that you see in Rudy's drawing here. I'm going to go to the next slide. And here you can see kind of a full-color rendering. And this is how they shipped it to the base coming from the crash site. So now we're at July 8th, 1947. We're at 4 p.m. We've got this nailed down literally plus or minus 5 minutes. Tom Carey, Don Schmidt did a lot of research tracking down witnesses. There were 2 paper boys that saw this. There were multiple eyewitnesses that saw this convoy going directly down Main Street. And you can take the same route today that the convoy took back in 1947. Literally the identical trip you can take today. So you can see a couple of Jeeps up front. Then you've got the 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy with this egg-shaped craft on top, and then a couple of Jeeps in back. I'm going to take you inside hangar P3 Building 84. This is July 8th, 1947. This would have been around 4:15 p.m. So off to the right, you've got the egg-shaped craft. In the foreground, you've got some of the deceased corpses. Off to the left, we've got the child-sized caskets that was talked about by Glenn Dennis. And then over to the left rear of the hangar is the beginning of the building of the crate that they put the bodies in. So let's continue on here. Now, another thing that's not talked about, which completely takes away the weather balloon phenomenon that they talk about here. Number one, weather balloons do not fuse sand into green glass. That's the first thing. So we're talking about something that's indicative of high heat that could fuse sand into glass. That's not a balloon. Number two is there were multiple witnesses that basically when this crate was lowered in atomic bomb pit number one, there were guards stationed inside and out of these concentric blinds told to shoot to kill anyone who would try to enter into these blinds. And then when they came home that night, the stench of the decomposing bodies permeated their suits so much that their wives had to burn their clothes. Now, we're not talking about weather balloons here. We're talking about ET bodies that were rotting and decomposing from the night of the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and into the very early morning hours of the 7th. So by the time they got there, they were decomposing, they were rotting, they were already being eaten by critters. And so when they finally got into atomic bomb pit number one, you can see that the stench just permeated the entire area. That's talked about in Witness to Roswell. I won't go into further details, but this is something that needs to be considered. All right, now, next one. Once they got the crate into atomic bomb pit number one, they took a B-29 called Straight Flush. They taxied over atomic bomb pit number one, and then by use of a hydraulic lift, they put that into the cargo bay and shipped it to 8th Air Force Headquarters, Fort Worth, Texas. So we had some debris and a few bodies shipped over there. Let's continue on here. Now, so we've got one egg-shaped craft associated with the Roswell incident. Now, getting back to Stringfield collection.
Can I just clarify something real quick?
Go ahead.
So that drawing with the UFO in the crane,
Correct.
that was the escape pod.
That was the escape pod. That
Because
was
to
the
me, it
13
looked
foot
that,
long.
and it looked more like a disc to me. But that
Yeah,
was
it
like
looks a
egg
little bit
shape,
more like a disc, but it was described by
and it was
Don
silver,
Schmidt as an egg-shaped craft with a dome on top.
silver colored like that too.
Silver
Gray,
colored. Yep.
metallic.
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that's what I was seeing in that
Yep.
picture.
Nope.
Thank
No
you.
problem. No problem. Now back to Stringfield witnesses, because you wanted to talk about egg-shaped craft, so I kind of compiled all my egg configuration cases here.
Yeah.
So this is UFO crash retrieval seen at a warehouse at Berkeley University.
Wow.
The witness is Albert Bruce Collins, now deceased. He's a metallurgical engineer. And this is UFO crash retrievals, page 197. So I'm going to give you the page number, the date, the location, all of the details. And if you want to follow along in Leonard's book, you can get into more details. But I just want to reference where I'm getting the information. So this metallurgical engineer, he's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backs into the warehouse at University at Berkeley. And basically he described this thing as about 30 feet across, 15 feet high. It looked like an egg. Now this thing had a hole breach or cracked. It literally looked like a cracked egg. And inside there was a 36-inch diameter central core or yoke. On the forward section of this craft, there was a composite panel. Wrapped around the outer circumference of this interior core or yoke was another composite panel. And then he said that there was debris sticking out of the back of it, like shrapnel and debris, which reminded him of something that might have been an internal implosion. So we're going to take Rudy's egg-shaped drawing as a guide, and I'm going to take you to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with. I want to give Joel Payne credit for this, but this is what we came up with. Now, it could still be there today. Who knows? But this is one example of an egg-shaped craft that came down and was sent to Berkeley University all the way back in 1947.
Wow.
And we'll go to the next one. Now, this is Fort Polk, Louisiana, summer 1953. HJ, he was a private in the Army. This is case A1 in Leonard's book, page 80. And we'll continue with the next one here. Now, this is what came down here. This is an egg-shaped craft, 30 feet across. So almost literally identical to the other one, except that this one had what looked like a rim that was still rotating around the outer portion of the craft itself. Now, 30 feet across. Now, I want to mention that there were medical personnel assisting the survivors coming out of this escape pod. Well, I wouldn't call it an escape pod, but more of an egg-shaped craft. And you see this entryway hatch. They were being assisted by medical personnel. So there's 3 walking out, and then there was their comrade was being carried in a stretcher to the back end of an ambulance truck, and there was some type of communication going on between the survivors and his comrade that was being carried off in the stretcher. Some type of communication that's talked about. Now, these beings were humanoid looking. They were 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting green flight suit. They'd had helmets on. They were wearing mittens. And then he said that when they were walking out of the entryway hatch, they had no knee joint. They could only move with their hip joint. So they had this strange, staggering type stepping here. Let me continue on. So here's Joseph Race full color rendering of the egg-shaped craft. You can kind of get an idea. Now, when the HJ, who's our source within Leonard Stringfield Military Witness Collection, when he got on site, he was there from beginning to end, and he said the ground was very hot to the touch. So it was still like burning embers. That's what he noticed. I'm going to do a blow up here, get you a little bit closer. Here are the beings walking out with the assistance of the medical personnel. And now this is talked about within the report. I didn't make any of this up. We went right to the military eyewitness report of the egg-shaped craft recovery. And then here is the comrade being kind of carried off into the ambulance truck. And we'll do one more blow up here. And this is what it looked like. And we've got multiple military witnesses that are telling us that this is what they're seeing. This is what they're reporting because they had firsthand knowledge of this. Now, what happened to the survivors? According to the source, the survivors had been sent to a hospital and put into isolation, but all soon died. He also learned that the cadavers were sent to a medical center near Washington, D.C. Now, what type of a medical center are we talking about here? Walter Reed Army Medical Center. This thing has a history of bodies being brought there, autopsies, x-ray technician reports. This place is like ground zero for ET retrievals, bodies. Absolutely. If we could run this to ground and have congressional hearings, we'd want to pull data from this location. Okay. Now, it's closed as of 2011, but somewhere those records exist. And that's what we need to get is that physical evidence to move this ball forward. I'm going to continue on here. Now, no discussion about egg-shaped craft can be complete if we don't talk about Lonnie Zamora's encounter back on April 24th, 1964, Socorro, New Mexico. Now, how this all started is he was chasing a speeder, and this 18-foot wide egg-shaped craft flies over, and he gives up chasing the speeder. He kind of makes a left-hand turn. He's going over these low rolling hills that have kind of a bush terrain. And then he sees this craft suspended by what looked like lunar landing gear. You could call it lunar landing gear pogo type sections. There was an exhaust port at the bottom. There were 2 small statued humanoid looking beings wearing one-piece tight-fitting overalls. He got pretty close to this craft. And then basically these beings went back into the craft, and he heard a clanging bang noise like an entryway hatch was shut. And then a few seconds later, there was another banging noise like someone pulled this latch or lever to seal this thing. Then there was a high-pitched noise, and then a blue-colored flame came out of the bottom of this thing, and then this thing hovered and then flew away at a slow rate of speed. Now, I'm thinking if you look at the evidence, are we talking about something man-made, or are we talking about something extraterrestrial? So, of course, I did some digging here. So here you see some of the other illustrations, and he got a lot closer than this. I'll move on here. Now, here there was a loud, ear-splitting roar coming out of this. So do ETs need to have a craft with a blue colored flame coming out of a nozzle and then a large ear splitting roar. ET craft are silent. They're seamless. They have no bolts. They have no seams. They have no fasteners. They have no rivets. Here's New Mexican, April 27th, 1964. Flying object visits region. Now, Lonnie Zamora, his integrity was always intact. Sometimes you have to go outside of the U.S. to get the really good information. So I'm highlighting these foreign publications. Here's their detailed drawing, and you can see Lonnie, he's ducking for cover here. You've got the exhaust coming out of it. And then we want to take a look at the imprints that these foot pads made into the ground. We really want to pay attention to this. So let's take a look at what was reported in the newspapers. So if you take the insignia and you rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, you end up what you see here on the upper left. And then if you transpose the T-piece section with the horizontal line, you get the second one down. And then if you replace and reorder the letters, you can see what you see on the lower left. So that's just something I want to bring up. So is there something else that we're dealing with here? The actual insignia was an inverted V with 3 hash marks. This is the actual insignia that's basically been reported incorrectly for over 50 years. Now, why did Lonnie Zamora sign off on a fake symbol? This is according to Ben Moss here. The symbol was changed by U.S. Air Force Major Holder for the simple reason that providing a fake symbol, if any other cases came up and a witness reported the fake umbrella symbol, then they would know that the witness was lying. By Lonnie signing the fake symbol may be drawn by Holder, Lonnie was signing a contract with the government to keep his mouth shut on the symbol. It was country, God, then family in those days. This is an email I got from Ben Moss back in 2020. So this is his assessment of why we got the symbol that we did. Now, if you take a look at this map of White Sands Missile Range and you look in the upper left, you'll see Socorro. Then you go down to the lower right where you have the scale, the chart here in miles.
Yeah.
Where this craft came down is no more than 5 nautical miles west of the boundary of White Sands Missile Range. So are we talking about a man-made craft that had a test flight? Is that what we're actually dealing with here? I won't go through all these here, but we talked about the hatch. We talked about the banging noise. We talked about the very loud roar and the blue colored flame coming out of the bottom of it. Let me go on here.
Right.
Now, take a look at the blow up on the right. Does that look like the landing gear leg and landing pad of an extraterrestrial vehicle? Or does this thing look very man-made, something that was done on a CNC milling machine? Because it doesn't look very ET to me here. Now, here is the imprint that it made in the soil. And then if we go on to the next slide here, this is page 208, you'll see a little bit more of a blow up here. This is looking very terrestrial to me. So that I did a SolidWorks rendering of this thing. And then from this, I did a 3-view drawing. And you can see here, look at the parallel faces. Look at the 90-degree angles. Look at the sharp V cuts. To me, this is something that's milled on a milling machine. This does not look like an extraterrestrial spacecraft landing gear pad here. Now, also want to mention something that was highlighted by Preston Dennett. So I want to give him credit. Wondrous, 25 true UFO encounters. And one of his witnesses had a very interesting encounter at Moss Landing Power Plant, Monterey Bay, California, back in 1997. Now, there were about 4 eyewitnesses that were at a dinner party engagement. And on the other side of the bay here, they saw a 50-foot long egg-shaped craft, because we're talking about egg-shaped vehicles. Yeah. It came out of the bay with kelp and water dripping off the side of it. Then it flew over to the Moss Landing Power Plant where you have these 400-foot tall stacks. It rose up to the top of the stacks, and then there was a hatch that opened out of this egg-shaped craft, and then this articulated arm retracted out, and it had this pincer device, and it started snipping the smoke on the top of the smokestacks. And this is all recorded in Preston Dennett's book. So let me go to the drawing here, and this gives you an idea of what these snippers look like as it was snipping at the smoke. So this is another example of these egg-shaped craft either being recorded, reported, recovered, multiple different scenarios that we're talking about here. Now, let's continue on. I want to give credit to Dr. Stephen Greer. He gets credit for this witness who tracked down Jonathan Wygant. This is 20 years ago. So now it's 25 years later. Martin Willis interviewed him on 9/5/23, but I want to give credit to Dr. Stephen Greer for tracking him down originally. Now, why is he important to our discussion today? Well, he was a Lance Corporal E3 Marine, and back in April 1997, he was sent to Bolivia. He was with two other personnel. They were in a Humvee. They stopped the Humvee about a quarter mile away, got out and started walking into the jungle. And what they described seeing is a 65-foot long by 45-foot high egg-shaped craft that embedded itself at a 45-degree angle right into a rocky granite cliff. I mean, literally embedded inside there. Now, he said that there was an indention that went around the outer portion of the craft itself. There were hull breaches on the bottom of the craft with this leaky oil that looked like rainbow colors coming out of this thing. He also said there was an elliptical hole on the top of it with what looked like an ET arm sticking out of it. This is all according to John Wygant, and he's talked about this in multiple interviews. So I want to go to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with another one of these egg-shaped UFO crash retrievals. And this is what I wanted to highlight with you this evening.
Wow. Wow, that's fascinating. A lot of great information there. So those are the ones that in your files and your research that are the egg-shaped cases.
These are the egg-shaped craft. That's correct.
Very interesting. Definitely going to go back and look at what you shared again. What do you think about the video that was shared? Did you see it?
I saw it, and first of all, I felt it was underwhelming. I don't think that video is going to move the ball forward. And if you listen very intently on what was released on News Nation, the video we saw was not the primary military witness coming from him. This is two different things here. People didn't pick up on this though, because it was rushed right through, and there were like 3 words in there before they cut to the video. And if you weren't paying close attention, you wouldn't know. But the video that Jake is describing is not the one that he was involved in. This is something they pulled separately. It's not the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and we haven't really gotten details on where exactly it came from. So, what do you think? I mean, what's your opinion on what the egg-shaped crafts? Is it just another variety of a craft? Is there possibly something experimental that of the man-made experiments?
Absolutely.
Do you
Absolutely.
is it
We just
both?
talked. Yep. I do think it's both, because we've got man-made craft mimicking the form, fit, and function of ET authentic articles. You've got test flights going on. And when we just talked about Lonnie Zamora, it was literally 5 nautical miles west of the boundary of White Sands Missile Range. That cannot be a coincidence. It's like they had some kind of problem. They were investigating it. They perhaps fixed it, and then they took off, and Lonnie was at the right place at the right time and got to see it. I've got other cases, March 23rd, 1966, Temple, Oklahoma, where Eddie Laxon saw a craft that came down, blocked his road where he was traveling on his morning commute, and he saw a human out of this craft pointing a flashlight at the bottom of it. He scurried up a ladder, and then the door closed. There was a high-pitched drilling noise, and then this thing took off. So this is not completely unprecedented. We've got multiple cases of these craft that land, and it looks like someone's making hasty repairs, and then this thing takes off. So it's screaming a man-made technology here.
Right. And what do you, if you had to estimate, what do you think the egg vehicles are? used for? Is it just for small, like, is it just another shape of a, or is there something special about it?
Well, I don't think we're talking about motherships here. We're not hearing about motherships crashing. What we're talking about here are much smaller scout ships.
Scout
That's
ship.
what's actually crashing. And
Okay.
they are tracking these things down. They're shooting these things down. The military industrial complex, in conjunction with the defense contractors, would love nothing more for us all to be duped and fooled into thinking that everything is ET, that there's a hostile threat, and that what they want to do is they want to exploit the technology for their free energy applications and for their weapons research. That's what's going on here. And a number of these are our own craft that have crashed by accident because they've
Yeah.
had test flights that have failed. That has been going on as well. They had
Yeah.
malfunctions, things didn't go perfectly. So it's a combination of both here.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is like, what kind of percentage would you put on it if you had to guess of how much UFO crash retrievals are human
Well,
experiments and like, or actually non-human?
right. Personally, my numbers are unpopular because I take a much more nuts and bolts approach to this.
Mhm.
Personally, I think that 95% of what people are reporting as authentic UFOs are our own deep black programs. Now,
Wow.
what that number is when you trickle it down to the crash retrievals, I still think that there's a large percentage that are man-made, but that doesn't describe everything. There absolutely appears to be a crash of these unknown origin vehicles that's already been admitted to in congressional hearings this year and last year, that they had an ongoing crash retrieval program. It's already been admitted.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. And actually, I would like to invite you back for a future show to really
Sure.
dive into your cases for what you think is the strong cases of the man-made. I think this is something that is really important for everyone to look at because, kind of like you said, if that's the case, we don't want to get duped into thinking everything's aliens and,
Correct. I
because,
mean,
hey, if we have this technology, we better, you know, utilize it for for the public good and not just for whatever it's being used for.
the other thing too to keep in mind is that this subject matter, the UFO subject in general, and the UFO crash retrieval specifically,
Hmm.
and you probably know about this. It was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. It was classified above top secret. So that's where Timothy Good got the name of his book, Above Top Secret. That's where that comes from. So when we talk about crash retrievals and defense contractors and secret things being shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or MacDill Air Force Base, you're now talking about the crown jewels, and they will stop at nothing to keep this under wraps.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, what do you think? Like, you showed us that 1947 case at Berkeley,
Correct.
and the witness seeing that egg-shaped craft at a
Mhm.
facility there. So we're talking 80 years. Like, we see
Yeah,
we see
I
the
know.
video. We see this guy like Jake Barber, just one person who apparently is involved in this for many, many years. Where they must have a lot of recoveries at this point.
Of course. Well, looking at the Stringfield book, I counted 119 crash retrieval cases. Now, if you look at Magic Eyes Only by my good friend Ryan Wood, he just republished an updated version from 20 years ago. He's got an additional 104 cases. So now we're looking at, you know, how many are we talking? 220, 230. If some of those are overlaps, that's fine. Let's knock off 75 of those.
Right.
You still have a tremendous amount of crash retrievals. And the more you get into this, the more the craft count goes up, the more the body count goes up. We've got so many cases of military personnel who by accident saw dish-shaped craft in hangars at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And there's been some pushback about this. Oh, it can't be true. There's no way the government would allow that to happen. Well, it happened. It happened. There are multiple cases where people who got on base, who they were supposed to be there, and they were jogging down the row of hangars. I've got a case in the Stringfield collection, and they ran right into a hangar where a disc-shaped craft was being guarded by military personnel with rifles. It was being suspended by 2 engine test stands. I've got another case from a gentleman who was a private pilot who worked for Braniff Airlines, and he saw 2 craft in a hangar at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base back in 1965. So absolutely, it's there. It's going on. There's way too many witnesses coming forward.
Right. Yeah. So, what are you looking for now as more information starting to come out, more whistleblowers coming forward? What are you looking for in the coming weeks, months?
Well, it'd be great if we could get some of these Stringfield witnesses to come forward. We're pushing, we're rushing the undertaker. It's going to be almost impossible to track these people down now because some of these cases are 40, 50, 60 years old. They're long since gone. These are the legacy witnesses. When they talk about a crash retrieval program, they're talking about Leonard's cases. They're talking about Leonard's military firsthand witnesses. That's who they're talking about in Congress. And these are the people that we need to track down. That's why this is so important. It is the Rosetta Stone, and it will facilitate the disclosure actually taking place. It's going to be the crash retrieval cases that do it. Nothing else is going to move this ball forward. We don't need any CE1s and we don't need any CE2s. What we need are military witnesses coming forward with bodies, craft, debris, and hardwares. Anything less than that, and we will be here another 50 years debating this whole thing, and we will not have pushed the ball forward. That's why the crash retrievals are the most important part of this whole thing.
Yeah. And you bring up a really interesting perspective there because you're almost saying that the historical cases are very important in this modern time because that would give you, that paper trail or evidence to look at the history and the context of what, government officials may now have on their hands with things that come forward now. So that's an interesting perspective. I really hope that you're able to track down some key witnesses and get that information, into the right hands to look at that because that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and these cases were documented. They were photographed. We've got multiple witnesses that mentioned that they had motion picture film reel cameras going. They had people with still cameras shooting this thing. So all of this evidence should be released for open congressional hearings that are streamed in real time around the world live. But the problem we're running into is that the senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C., they don't have a need to know and they don't have a high enough security clearance. So they can't get to it. And that's the problem we're running into. When you talk about UFO crash retrievals, you are talking about the crown jewels, the ace in the hole. You're talking about trump card technology. These are the terms they use. And they're not going to just give it up to the president, and they're not just going to give it up to some low-level senator and congressman, because these are temporary employees. They're gone in 4 years or they're gone in 2 years. So that's the problem we're running into is how can these senators, how can they release something that they're not cleared to or they don't have access to? That's the problem we're running into.
Right. Well, Michael, thanks a lot for coming on today,
Yep.
sharing with
Problem.
us your egg-ship cases and your perspective on all this. Always appreciate getting to hear your knowledge and your take on everything. So thanks
Great.
again, and
Yep.
I'd
Great
love
to
to
be
have
with you.
you. Yeah, of course, and definitely we'll have you back to go fully into the man-made cases and the ones you've picked out because there's some compelling stuff I remember from your presentations on that. So
Sounds good.
all right, man. Thank you
Okay.
again.
Thanks a lot. Yep. We'll see
You
you.
got it. Have a good night.
Too.
Cheers.